It's actually a bit worse than the mainstream media are saying. It's not 38, it's 48%. That's the new tax for companies like MG. And it's typically European to be too politically correct with how they've decided to go about coming out with this tariff and telling the Chinese this is what we're doing. So the US basically just said, look, China, we don't like you, we don't trust you, 100% tax, done. Took about a month. It was really easy. For us here in Europe, it took a pretend 9-month investigation to do the exact same thing. And we used the behaviour of the Chinese companies during the investigation to tell them what level of tax they will have. Apparently, that's what they say. I'm sure there's more to it than that. It just so happens that the state-owned brand MG gets taxed twice as much as all the others. Coincidentally, also that car has sold more than the other cars in the European market in 2023. So the current tax, 10%, is still staying, and every percentage figure I say from now will go atop of that existing 10%. And excuse if I sound a bit ill, I've got a very, very bad flu, and I'm basically dying. So the worst behaved company during this investigation was SAIC, which is part of the Four Group in China, big organization, lots of teaming up in China with big brands, which basically means MG for European people. That's the MG4. Is obviously an MG car owned by SAIC, state-owned. That car is going to be quite a lot more expensive. The base model, I think, is €11,000 more expensive, roughly as of July or so. So they get the largest tax hike of the full 38.1% on top of the 10%, meaning that the base price for the MG4, which currently costs about €28,990 in Europe, will now cost €11,000 more, and that's now a €41,000 vehicle, supposedly after July 4th, unless China put forward some documentation as evidence to defend themselves, in which case the tax will be postponed. And I don't think there will be a person alive that thinks that anything is going to change from the EU. It just might push it back a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and they will allow it to look as though they're being fair, I think. They might give them a couple of months before implementing this tax, but I don't think anything will change. So the MG4 now has a 48.1% tax on it when it comes into the EU bloc of the 27, 28 countries, which is a big deal given that lots of people like it. There are around 730 million people in the EU. And Volvo will have a 20% tax hike. Volvo is owned by Geely, if you didn't know. Geely, that's a very, very Chinese company, but it's not state-owned. And BYD will get 17.4% on top of that 10%, bringing it to 27.4% instead of the original 10%, which I think it's not the end of the world, you know? You could still go buy one and it'd be a nice car, and you wouldn't feel overly hard done by. So the extent of the Chinese state support, the EU alleges, is as follows. So the European Union asserts that the entire EV production chain in China, from lithium extraction for batteries to vehicle shipment to European ports such as Rotterdam, Zeebrugge, benefits from extensive state subsidies at multiple government levels, federal and state, I think you'd call it in China. Their investigation also uncovered a few instances where car factories were built on land provided either very, very, very cheaply or for free, and I mean very, very cheaply. Specific subsidies were noted, including lithium and battery provisions below the market rates, which, with battery suppliers functioning as public entities, executing national industrial strategies, which is a big no-no. The probe also revealed tax exemptions were granted to the battery industry. So the 9-month investigation identified numerous financial perks, such as green bonds offered at rates lower than international standards, and preferential refinancing rates for funds supporting the sector. And I think you say I will endeavour to say his name. Is it Xi Jinping? His goal basically is to achieve global leadership in green technologies such as EVs, solar panels, heat pumps, wind turbines. Hence the support that has been given to its companies. They're obviously looking at the future and trying to get there first before everybody else, I think. A spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Lin Jian, said the EU's investigation was typical case of protectionism, which it is, I think, and tariffs would damage China/EU economic cooperation and the stability of production and supply chains of vehicles globally. I would have to agree, probably. He said Beijing would take all necessary measures to firmly safeguard its rights and interests, which China does that quite well, so that's not a good thing to have them say. And I do believe, this is not confirmed, you have to check your contract, if you order a car before this date, or before they implement it, even if they push it back, you should get your price locked in, but that's only going to be written in your contract when you pay a deposit to order a car. So you should be able to get the cheaper prices locked in. The EU asserts that state support allows Chinese car manufacturers to directly undercut their European competitors because they're better and cheaper, really. And it is hindering the EU's transition from internal combustion engines to battery electric vehicles, and the EU aims to phase out the sale of new ICE or internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035. According to EU data, Chinese-made cars represented 25% of the EU market in 2023, which was a big jump up from 3.9% in 2022. So the EU basically contends that the intense trade competition in China, which has driven down prices domestically, is now spilling over into Europe. They're not happy about this. Really not happy about this. This situation forces EU manufacturers to lower their prices, adversely affecting their profits and potential for future investment. So when this was backed by the EU Commission, the spokespeople for both Mercedes and Volkswagen, they both said basically, we aren't happy about it. And it is basically just raising barriers that need not be there. And that's not useful for either side. I would totally agree. The only person that is winning here is nobody. And the only person losing is the consumer, I think. So what do you all think about this? This all feels very orchestrated to me, I think. And I reckon that Volkswagen and Mercedes, the spokespeople are saying this because they know it will mean that China will now increase their import duty on their vehicles, and also Volkswagen have a deal or a joint venture with SAIC, which this won't help, relations, you could say. And for those of you that are new to the channel, I'm Ben Alexander. Thank you very much for joining me. And even I'm kind of dying today. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoy these sorts of videos. And I make EV news videos most days.